Okay, so welcome to the 1111 group here. Um, we have today a very special guest, Mr. Johnny James II. I first met Johnny at a Operation Spark demo day. And if you don't know, Operation Spark is kind of like a tech learning program for folks that want to get into working in technology. So it's a way to skill up on the great development skills. And they have a demo day at the end of their program to demo some great projects. And I think some people here are also from that demo day. Um, and I have to say, I went in knowing Operation Spark, knowing kind of the process and having been to demo days in the past, expected to kind of sit back and listen to students who went through kind of a accelerated program and were presenting their school projects. But what I saw instead was a highly professional, highly motivated, and highly focused group of individuals who had a mission and a purpose. And every project and every person that stood on that stage at the demo day felt like they could have been standing next to Steve Jobs. It was quite amazing. It moved me very deeply and made me think that we really have an opportunity to change lives in New Orleans through programs like Operation Spark. I have to say, though, what I think launched the energy for this demo day that was a moving experience for me was our guest today, Mr. Johnny James. And Johnny brought this energy that I just can't explain, can't describe, and want to comprehend. So, Johnny, my first question for you today is how do you channel, bring energy to other people's projects? How do you build that suspense, that drama, and that impact that I saw you bring to that demo day? Do you like take me through some of your process?
What a question. First, thank you for that awesome setup and introduction. Very humbled to hear that. Blake hasn't actually explained that or shared that with me before. As far as the answer to your question, as I always tell the folks coming through the program, or I shouldn't say always, I've been saying it recently though, because it's true. It's really easy to elevate great to excellent, right? And when you're dealing with greatness, it pulls greatness out of you, right? So the ultimate answer to your question is that I'm feeding off of the excitement and the energy of these young folks who have been going for it with all their might. And they're so inspiring to me. It's impossible for me to show up in that space anything other than jazzed up and on fire to make sure that other people see the same exact qualities that I see within them. And there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes that you all may not be privy to, where I'm getting to see them work through their process. And really, as I have explained to them multiple times, it is a sacred responsibility from my perspective. And I am absolutely honored to be able to serve them. So that's where the energy comes from. It just comes from this place of honoring what's happening and being present to it.
And what are you focused in on? Like where if someone comes up to you and says, "I have no idea. I'm very, kind of hesitant about presenting things. I don't usually present things in the past." Where do you bring that kind of sacred energy out? How do you tap into that?
Um, I'll have to give a massive shout out to the great Simon Sinek, but we go into why, and we go deep into it. There's a why you chose to build this app when you could have built any app. There's a why you decided to come to this maniac program and dedicate 6, 7, 8 months of your lives to it. And typically, right in that zip code of the why is something that just unlocks that person, right? Once they get present to their own why and distinguish it for themselves in the context of, hey, I've got something that I believe is valuable. I've poured into it with my teammates for weeks on end, and I want it to show up in the world in a way that makes an impact. I just don't know how. Well, let's go to the why. Yo, what was the complaint? right? What problem were you trying to address? Why was it important to you for that to be addressed? And then as we discover the responses to those questions, it just magically starts to happen for them.
Do you so going into like this idea of origin stories, how closely related is someone's personal experience to their relationship to solving a or their relationship to a problem or the process of solving a problem? Like where does the person's personal experience come into this origin story process?
I think it's a very high correlation, right? Because if you don't have the complaint, if you don't have the issue that's inside of you somewhere, it's really difficult to develop the passion to deal with that thing, you know? I think about this last project that we had, the presentation for the demo day, and it was one of those things where it was like, well, why did you build this app in the first place? And once they calmed down and just thought about, well, why did we build this app in the first place? It was super obvious to them, like, yo, we love our community. We want people to be able to experience this community in a way that's not generic and cliche. Everybody's going to tell them to go down to the French Quarter. Everyone's going to tell them to go down to Jackson Square. What about these hidden jewels that you wouldn't necessarily know about? We wanted to create an app that would expose you to that in a way that was unique and exciting and would leave a lasting memory and make you feel like you were a better tourist. And I was like, that's it. That's it. Let's build from there. And the presentation just flowed all of a sudden when in reality they were very much stuck prior to that. And if you think about their personal whys, like one of the members, they were really big into education. Obviously, education is about helping people discover new things, right? One of the members, they were really big into the biking community and like, hey, if you're on the bike, you have a different perspective than if you're in the car about your urban environment and what you're experiencing and how you're moving through it. So certainly the things that were really important to them ends up showing up in their work in a way that maybe not be, it might not be immediately obvious to them, but once they start tackling the whys of it, those connections start to manifest.
Now, talk to me a little bit about editing the why, because you can highly creative people I see oftentimes go in lots of different directions. And the focus that I see in some of these demo day presentations is something that carries with me closest.
Yeah,
And like, how do you take a highly creative person and bring them into a
oh,
highly
I could.
focused position of solving problems?
I'm
Um, I would say that part of the opportunity there is just to get them thinking about, well, who is the villain in my story? Or what is the villain in my story? That's another way to ask that question of what is the problem you're trying to solve that sometimes helps people see it more clearly. Like, yo, there's a heroic journey going on here, which is ultimately the framework for every origin story, right? It's built on the hero's journey, right? And so if there's a heroic journey going on here, well, then there must be some villain that's associated with this. And what I find is that, and this is a shout out to Chris Doe from Future. What you find when you start to delve into who are the villains in my story is that those villains are what called you to action, right? It is because of them that you get to step into the fullness of who you are choosing to become, right? And if you think about the most famous superheroes that we have in the comic book world, most of them we love so much in part because of who their villains are. Their villains are so credible. The threat is so palpable that, oh my God, you were willing to face that? Where did that courage come from? Where did that vision come from? Where did that insight come from? Where you said, I can stand up to this and do something about it, right? And once people get in touch with the fact that that's what they're doing, no matter what their story is, like ultimately there is a villain in it somewhere, and that's what they're doing. They're showing up as the hero for the people who have these concerns. Again, things just start clarifying. It's almost like if you're familiar with Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication concept, where like every act of violence is predicated by an unmet need. Well, if we can get to an agreement about what the needs are, the solution just immediately distinguishes itself.
That's yeah, and I think bringing it to your story now, because I would love to hear you talk about some of your kind of new entrepreneurship focus and how that taps into your origin story. And maybe we can use that as a jumping off point to bring other folks in and kind of, I guess my first question would be like, when you're introducing your story, what is it that is the why? What problem are you trying to address, and what villains are you going after? I'm gonna use your same exact framework to kind of like hit on to what you're doing in your entrepreneur kind of journey.
Sure. So I'll answer it two ways, right? Because before you joined, I said that there's sort of two ways to approach this. You can do your personal origin story or your business origin story. Both are very important. So from a personal perspective, if you just get down to the brass tacks of why am I on this planet, who I am is the possibility of creating miracles primarily for other people now and now and now. Like the fulfillment of miracles is what I'm here to cause, right? And so obviously that means that I pour myself into opportunities to serve people. And if you look into my origin, and of course, my mother is with us, my sister is with us. Like a lot of it has to go back to the women that were in my life, but specific to the service piece, it was my grandmother, right? My father's mother. I distinctly remember spending summers in Los Angeles with this woman who I think she had a third or fourth grade education. She never learned how to drive, but her heart, her soul was committed to service. And it showed up as, hey, every Sunday we're going to go to church. And when we get to church, I'm going to write down the names of every single person that's listed in this announcement of who's sick and shut in. And then Monday through Saturday, me and you are going to get on the city bus and we're going to visit every one of those people. I'm going to bring them fruit. I'm going to bring them a get well card. We're going to sit and talk with them. And of course, as a 6-year old, 7-year old, you're sitting there like, this is god awful. This is so boring. I came to California to hang out during the summer. Right. But then later in my life, I realized that there was a foundation that was built within me. That if I would find myself by defaulting to who I was, and who I was someone who was committed to service. So I just kept looking for opportunities to do that. Now, as an entrepreneur, ultimately, my journey with Reef Buds, this novel artificial reef material from the Philippines, began with a desire to protect something that I had learned about from potential bad actors, right? I learned about Reef Buds from a friend of mine. Some other people learned about it because of me just promoting it, and they wanted to buy Reef Buds. And I'm not sure that they had the best intentions for it. So I said, I'm going to be the one that gets Reef Buds in the water. I'm going to commit my life to serving this agenda here, which is we have dead zones all over the world, particularly here in the Gulf of Mexico. This technology can restore dead zones. It can resurrect a dead zone and turn it into a fertile organic ecosystem. I said, that's a miracle if it can happen. I'm going to be at cause for that. So, that's sort of like a straight line through from who I am and my origin story to how it showed up as an entrepreneur. Like, if that opportunity to create a miracle, like, yo, we've just resigned ourselves. There's nothing we can do. That's how people feel. And if I can transform that reality, that perspective, that's what I'm going to seek to do. I can't do the easy stuff. I have to do the extremely hard because that's how I was programmed.
That's great. I think that's a common kind of piece between entrepreneurs is they have to do the very hard. It's not you're solving the biggest problems. Um, I have no idea how this format is going to go for mini workshops going in. I mean, John, if you have any good ideas, let me know. But I think it's just pushing it out to see if anybody wants to share their origin stories, and then we can kind of discuss it as a group and take it from there. Um, and I don't want to put anybody in the spot, so maybe we can kind of go down. If anybody wants to raise their hand and just kind of be the first one to get in there and do the scary, feel free to right now. Um, if not, I would love, I see Becca's here. I'd love to hear from Becca. I see Bailey here. She
I'm
is great chess.
I'm down to jump in right away.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I'll take
Joseph.
the dive and go first.
Woohoo!
Um, Hi everybody, my name is Joseph Makos. I just want to give like the Reader's Digest version of my origin story. Um, I've been in New Orleans for about 15 years. I've been living here full time. I came here a few years before that and sort of laid the bulkhead for my arrival in New Orleans. Um, I uh, my founder story is kind of like I grew up in antiques. So my dad was an antique dealer. My whole life, my dad and mom ran antique shops, and I grew up in this antiquity, and just like learning about basically all sorts of things that a lot of people would never even venture to have the knowledge of this material culture history. Um, I came to New Orleans to become an educator, and I've taught for about 8 or 9 years as an educator, um, until sort of like my life changed. I was noticing that after Hurricane Katrina, there was a lot of mom and pop print shops that were going under and weren't never came back from before. And this was kind of like an industry that was sort of failing, but really like it was just changing rapidly with technology. I started by collecting old printing equipment, historic letterpress type, font magazines, typography pieces, all sorts of different things that I felt were kind of being lost to time and were markers of material culture history, not only in the fact that they could make things again, but the fact that they have this sort of production history, this sort of like living history of, oh, it's a piece, but that can make something different that was disseminated to the masses. And so I started first collecting these sort of things, and then after a while of collecting all that, I was given the opportunity to um, save a historic New Orleans newspaper archive of over 1 million pages of historic newspapers from 1850s to the 1930s, 1929 to be exact. And basically, I answered an ad on Craigslist, and this family was getting rid of this collection that had been meticulously restored and preserved for several decades, for a decade or more. It turns out that they bought it from the people who bought it from the British Museum. So it's actually the British Museum's New Orleans newspaper collection that, in a crazy way, made its way back to New Orleans, and then ultimately into my hands as a private owner individual. Um, as we know, I've been working on this project for a number of years. Of course, sidetracked with a bunch of things like the pandemic and going back to grad school for 5 years to try to become a professional on the exact thing that I'm pretending to be to run a business around. Um, and basically, like the problem I'm solving is the fact that none of this history is available to be searchable with Google-like speeds, and the content isn't vectorized, and the only actual accessible public history archives of this is in a 72 DPI form that is only 50 to 60% searchable. So the problem we're solving is the attempt to redigitize the entire thing from originals in 600 DPI, make it vectorable, and ultimately make it programmable. And so that's the mission that I'm on. And my origin story is kind of based on the fact that what can start as an obsession can turn into a lifelong project. And
Love that.
I guess that's that.
Thanks, Joseph. I think so. The thing that I was hearing with Joseph's origin story, like there's 2 points that really hit me hard, was that he has a past in archive, being an archivist, and that he's doing right now what, with new technology, what could never have been done before. Um, and in my experience in talking with different investors, you really want to be the person who has a history of doing something and a future that is something that nobody has ever nobody has ever done before. And so those two things hit really hard. The one thing I will note, and Johnny, I'm curious if you have the similar thing, is around brevity, which is just like the closer you can get to uh, one word and one very, very impactful word, the more I feel, the more I see the goal you're going for being answered. So Johnny, I'm kind of curious what you think about that origin story and kind of how you would hone and what you would do with that.
Yeah, so absolutely. I just steal from Simon Sinek. Start with why, right? Typically, what happens when we're answering questions like these is that we start with what, then we get into the how, and then we close with the why. And if we just reverse that order and we start with the purpose, why, then we get into the how, and then we close with the what, they call it the golden circle, you'll just get to the heart of the matter faster because it felt like the big impactful part for me at least was once you started getting into that purpose side, which was towards the end. Like you wrapped it all up and consolidated it into this is the package. Just start with the package. You're on,
Anybody
Blake.
else?
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in? By the end of this, we'll have a very clear idea of origin stories. Bailey, Becca,
I
Birdsong.
can,
Yep.
yeah, Becca, you go first.
Go ahead, Bailey. Go ahead, Bailey. You got this.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Um, well, I guess I'll do my origin for the chess cave. So
And remember,
more or
it's
less,
why, how, what. How, why, how, what. Let's.
okay. All right. So I guess I started the chess cave Red Beret Chess Foundation nonprofit because I am very close friends with chess master Jude Akers, and he grew up in an orphanage, really had no family, has sort of operated on the street in New Orleans for going on 43 years. And I met the owner of a building in the French Quarter who gave me access to this tiny space that he owns. And we saw that there was a need to set up something for Jude as a sort of safety net as he's getting older. So I guess that's my why. And then you said how. So I guess that also answers how. I literally met a guy playing chess with Jude in a bar in the pandemic who gave me this opportunity, and we just ran with it. And I got a couple of volunteers. We slapped up chess wallpaper on the walls, filed the paperwork, and started putting on tournaments and events. And it's gotten some major publicity without even really trying. And now, we're just focused, I guess, on scaling the foundation. And Jude will be celebrating his 80th birthday tomorrow. All of you are invited. It's going to be at 1018 Decatur Street from about 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. We're just going to be playing chess in the street and giving away cash prizes to participants. So, yeah,
I have one question. What
sure.
is the biggest addressable problem that you're trying to solve?
I would say the first big problem was improving Jude's quality of life, which I've addressed. I got him a much nicer apartment. I make sure his internet bill, well, you and Justin, but in addition, like his electric bill, making sure he gets to the doctor, and those needs have sort of been addressed. So now the mission of the chess cave is to promote and encourage chess education in New Orleans. And we want to do more, I guess, outreach. And so, Jude is really adamant. He wants to do schools and prisons, bring chess sets, give away chess sets, and do demonstrations in those spaces. So
Johnny, do you have any thoughts of how to bring this into a, because your origin story definitely had a global significance, or like a significance that was hitting uh, a real kind of large impact area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just say that it definitely, so there's obviously the opportunity for the how to evolve, right? The why is always going to kind of be the why. And it sounds like the why is a little bit deeper, like maybe it's related to some sort of erecting a way for human connection to occur. And doing so, you're attempting to honor this individual. So he's sort of the inspiration for the why. But yeah, I kind of feel like this has something to do with just like facilitating deeper human connections, right? I have memories around sitting around chessboards myself when I was younger, and the conversations that can occur during the game, they're sort of unique to that world. You talk about things that maybe you don't normally talk about when you're playing chess. So I think that that's part of really what the purpose is, and that if you think about his background that you were sharing with us of being an orphan, not having all those human connections that are supposed to be there to stabilize your development and whatnot, that certainly seems like that's really what's trying to be addressed, especially when I'm hearing about a desire to interact with folks who are more or less marginalized or even disconnected from society when we're thinking about prisoners and things of that nature. So yeah, I think that's sort of the underpinning that I'm hearing there, but it all sounds very good.
And Johnny, I'm kind of curious when you are focusing on like the impact need, that necessity, um, how like how do if someone just really likes some, a human being and wants to honor that one human being, and there's not like the the direct big impact piece, how do you reconcile that um with the need to have like that hero's journey? How can a hero be someone who is simply helping one other person out? Johnny?
But I believe that comes down to context and perspective, right? I understand that society values the hero story when it impacts so many more, but I think there's an opportunity for groups like this to edify the stories that go deeper into what my wife might refer to as the micro impact as opposed to the macro impact. And I also believe that there are significant learnings that become available to us when we sort of perfect our ability to impact by starting small and then growing that larger. But I think more than anything, it's just about honoring that particular story. And I think about some of the unique stories that have come up about New Orleanians of the past through this group so far, because this isn't the first one that I've heard. And it kind of just makes me feel like um, maybe we haven't applied the proper significance to those stories. And it's not actually a situation where there's a small impact. It's just that we haven't adequately measured the grand impact, because we're talking about exceptional people who are inspired by these people that are here in this group right now. So the impact must be grander than we've been able to appreciate and articulate up to this point.
Yeah. And so Becca, you wanted to go next?
Yeah, sure. So both Alex Smith and I have co-founded Prescription Joy, which is a healthcare clowning nonprofit, a therapeutic healthcare clowning nonprofit in New Orleans. So we go into hospitals and go room to room with patients, adults and children, and kind of get them to express themselves again, get them to play again, get them to not just see themselves as this sick patient, but as the person they are, bring them to wholeness, essentially. And I would say my why over the years has deepened. Like it started as one thing, and I think it's the more and more I do it, the more I learn myself, and the more I get influenced by different patients that we visit, different people we collaborate with. It's deepened to like the core behind it was everyone has a right to joy. No matter what institution you're in, you should have access to joy and self-expression. And something I've noticed, and the deepening aspect to that for me is that I was a teacher for a long time, and I'm just seeing so many similarities with what institutions do and the harm with of institutions and the lack of humanity in them. And what our job is we go in as clowns and interrupt that system with humanity. And that's kind of, I feel like a big push for me on that end. Also, both Alex and I were significantly injured. We're both performers, physical performers, and we had been doing a lot of physical performance in the street, and then we both got significantly injured. I had a brain injury. He had a significant accident, and we kind of woke up from that and realized, like, oh wow, the ableism is everywhere, and kind of rethinking where the arts are and where self-expression lies. And yeah, that's a quick sum up. Happy to elaborate more.
I'm kind of curious with your impact story of humanism, basically, of like saying, like, bringing humanism into an environment. How do you see that? What, like, if you take it into a non-abstract way of putting in a term like humanism or humanity, where do you see the most direct representation of, wow, we are doing the thing that I set out to do. This is actually working.
When you hear laughter in the halls of a hospital, like that is it, or when a child or a parent get to, or a patient, not just a child, an adult, when they get to kind of interact and laugh about something different or talk about something different than just the illness, just like when's the nurse coming in. I feel like that's a big transformation. Alex, is there any moment you're thinking of in particular right now?
I dumped it into the chat, but really it's a procedure
Yeah.
might be intimidating, scary, or the kiddo knows is going to hurt or be uncomfortable because they've had it before. Being done with little to no fuss because the clowns are there to help disrupt it or change it up a little bit. A patient that is in rehab going through extra reps because the clowns are there egging them on. That happened literally last month. And the clinician was like, you can do that many reps for me. And the kid, you know, who's a tween is a little too cool for, so, well, yeah. Those are the kind of like hard things that are not just the squishy words of humanity, but the actual fact and recordable that kiddo, you know, has had this change today or has done this extra work today that the work does. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. Becca did awesome. Otherwise, I don't have anything else
Oh,
to add.
thank you. Thank you for that, Alex.
Yeah, I really think that the script, when I hear humanity, and I've been hearing that a lot recently, and when I hear the actual experience that unlock that, that usually becomes to me like what it's all about.
Yes.
And the more if the more I hear the word humanity and the more I see what is unlocking that like that's where everything kind of seems to, that's the how, that's the why, that's the what.
Mhm.
Johnny, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, number one, hearing that the sort of the social validation is the smiles on faces makes me smile, right? But that's something to consider too, as particularly as a founder, but even as an individual who's building your personal brand. Social validation is the evidence that you're doing what you said you were going to do. People will start to show up and say things like, yeah, Prescription Joy puts smiles on faces that you never even spoke to before, because you are fully living your mission, vision, your why.
Mhm.
I love that.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to jump in now? Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, yeah, we'll share. So I'm here with Brandon and Andrew, my partners as well. And again, I'm Harry with Centered. And you know, as a quick refresher, we're building a platform for the future of owner-occupied real estate in cities. We deeply believe in the power of people and their places. You know, before this, thinking a little bit about, you know, our origin story and sort of what Johnnie shared. There's the sort of the business origin story, and then how each of us comes to this, you know, as a human. And while I'll quickly share the origin story of how we came together and built what we've built so far, but we've all come at this from different, you know, sort of pathways, all of which sort of have contributed to what we believe we can offer, you know, people at the end of the day. You know, Centered began with a single vacant lot in the Central City neighborhood of New Orleans, and Brandon, Andrew, and I coming together My background has largely been in technology, working in sort of some tech related to real estate, distressed assets, things like that. So I know a little bit about how those things come together. Our objective was to just initially develop something that was a net positive for the people in the place that we were developing, and found out that was very challenging. Right, all the forces kind of at play with trying to develop something on this even single lot, in a neighborhood with rapid displacement due to rising property values and a bunch of things, sort of dynamics in the neighborhood. We acquired a second lot and trying to figure out, okay, can we get some economy of scale? And then everything sort of changed for us when we met our next door neighbor, who had run, Kendrick Harris, whose family had run a barbershop in that location for over 30 years. And at the time we met him post Hurricane Ida, the building had taken a bunch of damage, and he was at risk of losing that building. We worked with Kendrick to try to figure out, okay, how could we team up? Because we know that both this place and your history in this place is very important for the people who, some still live in this immediate location, and many are still connected to it and spend a lot of time there. And so we tried to figure out what's the financing for this look like? What do the operations look like? How do we deal with all the legal aspects? And what we realized is that, conventional wisdom sort of said, hey, if we were looking to buy this property, renovate it and rent it out, or buy it and flip it, there's a bunch of financial tools and operational tools out there to do that. But if our plan included this barbershop being brought back with the same owner and create some value on the upside from cash flow out of that building, and have it persist for decades to come in the family, those tools didn't exist. And so we decided to work on a solution for that. So we built a lending tool product off of our platform, and are now working through all the other sort of legal elements. And my own kind of pathway into this originally, personally came from I'm the product of a father who grew up in a double, right? Not in New Orleans, but it was a self-subsidizing 2-family building bought on a VA loan, right? Which then enabled me to grow up in a single family home, right? That was the only asset really that my family had. And then eventually, 20 years later, I got into my own, right? And so we believe in the power of people in their places. That's how I got here. But Brandon and Andrew, I'd love you to share too.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Harry did an amazing job doing the business origin. So my quick personal why and how I approached it. So Andrew Albert from New Orleans. My family's been here for 100, some, which means that I was like 13 happened, and it was a very
Oops, looks like.
Oh, Andrew, you're freezing.
frozen.
Oh, now you're back.
Yeah, you froze for a second.
Oh man. New Orleans is important. Place is important. I was impacted by Katrina. We want to make sure that people can own property and stay in New Orleans for multiple generations.
I love that.
Yeah. So similarly, I grew up in Mid-City. I'm living in Mid-City now. When Katrina happened, that was the first time I became aware of the dynamic and ever-changing nature of the built environment. Before then, I hadn't really had a reason to kind of think through what it meant for residents to have equity and sort of have a voice within their place. So fast forward 3 or 4 months post Katrina, when I came back to Mid-City and just looking around, noticed that the residents were different. Houses that I thought would be there forever were gone. Stores that closed. I didn't have and I didn't really have anything to reference before then to even think through what it meant to have agency over place. And so that made it that's what made, you know, kind of the efforts with Centered make so much sense for me, because it's, you know, my way of trying to rectify what happened and what I observed at 11, 12 years old.
So what's really popping for me, and I'm curious, Johnny, if this is similar with you, is the how and why. I'm not quite getting the what as much. Um, J Johnny?
Clearly the wood is still in development, right? But I will say this, the why is the most important. And the how will kind of figure itself out, but you do have to have some goalpost or GPS, right? When have we landed at our destination? And sort of that's where the what comes in. But I do believe that you're onto something. Having worked in real estate, having experienced lost houses post Katrina in our family, myself, like it's definitely a valuable contribution. And I think I have some resources that can help you devise the what a little bit more clearly.
That's great.
We'd appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Anyone else? I see Mark's here, he is one of the best origin stories I've ever heard in my life. If he's around, or anyone want to jump in at all? Cool.
I can jump in if Mark doesn't want to.
Yeah, please jump in.
All right, my name is Evan. So I am an Operation Spark graduate. So I know Johnny through his tireless energy. My origin story, I'm going to start off with my why and what is sort of an important sort of lens through which I really try to process or like think about what my impact is going to be. And I want to inspire as much awe as possible as like a pure emotion. So whatever I do, I'm trying to think about how those actions are going to create that emotion. And I kind of landed on that because I was reading an article about it's called collective narcissism, and it's this concept that the in-group that we're a part of is the most important thing in the world, and any threat to that sort of that in-group is like the most catastrophic threat. And I think that is a weird psychological aspect that we're all working with and trying to navigate. And I don't need to go into much detail about that. But the thing that can really transcend those differences is this emotion of awe. And it's really hard to manufacture those that emotion. I'm actually really excited to see what happens with this the eclipse that's coming up, because that is like one of these rare events where all of us can look up at the same thing and have this sort of unified experience that really does transcend all these differences that we have. My professional background, I like definitely have a sort of itinerant path, but for a little while I was a venue manager for like an event venue. I'm in Michigan, by the way. So I was living in New Orleans for a number of years. I moved right before the pandemic hit, so it was sort of an odd time to kind of land there. But ended up doing Operation Spark after having a gig as a technical writer for a little while. But before I moved to New Orleans, I was working events and just seeing how they were really able to bring people together. It sort of does like move people beyond their normal brain state of this focus on the in-group that I think is really easy to get sucked into when you're living in a certain like media climate and political climate. But those things kind of get tossed off to the side when you are surrounded with people who are just looking to have a good time, when you have those things bringing people together, which, in an event like a wedding, like it's literally like music, alcohol, and people, and you are on your way to sort of this like this, I don't know, experience that really does like transcend these differences. So for me, the product that I'm working on, the business I'm working on, that I'm trying to develop, and working with my other teammates who were also part of Operation Spark, it is kind of originated, and I think this is a good lens to see it through, is an app that helps you navigate Mardi Gras, which sounds sort of silly, but or simple enough. But it's about allowing you to coordinate your day, closing the loop between like coordinators and attendees, allowing sponsors to have a platform for marketing what they're already marketing, and that's perhaps like the money stream in and of itself. But as a product, I just think it can work really well to smooth out sort of the wrinkles that these large public events sort of encounter consistently, which is really just about being able to access information about the event as quickly as possible. And regarding, other events, Mardi Gras in itself is such a chaotic experience. I think most everyone, I'm assuming everybody here is New Orleans based or grounded there. But I just see how this could be a really powerful tool for all coordinators, and just to get more people involved, just to sort of connect a lot of dots, which I think can really improve the quality of events and their accessibility and safety, and for small businesses that are sort of located in the vicinity of these events, just
So
like
you say the goal is to create less friction around
less
the
friction.
experience of getting to awe?
Yes.
Like these
Yeah.
are the events that cause awe, but there's friction to just experiencing the awe because there's all this stuff going on, and this can
Too
help
much
you
stuff.
smooth that out, and you just get to the awe.
You get to the awe. Yep, that's about it.
One of
Thanks,
the
Johnny.
one of the things around awe, which I like that you brought up something, another kind of abstract concept like awe. When I think about my origin story, it starts with an abstract concept called eudaimonia, which is like a Greek concept of fulfillment. And what I quickly found was abstract concepts are great, but they're really hard to build apps to serve, or really hard to build a business to realize. Like, I want to bring humanity to X place. Well, there's a lot of ways to do that, and um drilling into really what is that you are doing through the lens of whatever kind of abstract concept you feel or innate is where I found the most success. So for instance, with my piece, I do website accessibility. Um, I started, because you mentioned awe, I'll just say that I started trying to figure out what would unlock eudaimonia for as many people, what could unlock fulfillment for as many people as possible, using my own background and skill set. And I realized that very quickly that I couldn't become a doctor, that that a philosopher has very little impact. And what I had done most of my life was web design. And one of the most fulfilling experiences that I ever had, and where I saw that clear eudaimonia, that clear fulfillment, was when I saw a blind person access a website that they weren't able to access before. And that moment, I said, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to make the web accessible. Over 96% of the internet isn't accessible to people who are using screen readers. For me, that's a terrible, terrible statistic, and one that needs to change. And so I started my company to focus on making the web more accessible. We are this year providing 11 million website accessibility fixes. Just in the last week, we scanned 150,000 pages. We did a deal with WordPress recently. WordPress runs about 40% of the internet to scan and fix their issues. And the hope at the end of the day is that folks who have not been exposed to information in the past, who have not had that amazing kind of experience that we take for granted every day of coming to a website and finding new information, or finding a tool that makes our lives just a little bit better, that they can do that with my work and my help, and really kind of open their lives to a whole new social experience that they wouldn't have. And so that's my kind of origin story, and that's my target. And I think I would push everyone here to do is really focus on that. Look at that abstract concept, sure, the humanity, the awe, but really focus in on what tangible material production pieces gets to that, and what does it actually look like. There's an amazing poetry called imagist poetry that just looks at the image and tries to describe the image as much as possible with as many concrete terms as possible. And that's one of the things I think is lacking, is really like the concrete terms of this is what I see, and just conveying that image alone, like Johnny on the bus with his grandma, like that image is an amazing, palpable, emotional experience that we don't have to talk about through the emotions. We can just talk about through the image. Or Beck and Alex hearing laughter in the hallways of a hospital. Um, it's a poetic and powerfully impactful image that you can then build an entire business around to promote, to push in a very clear way. And one of the things that I'll also add is that I'm not hearing too much of is um, is a clear way to fail at what you're doing, or pass or fail. But when I am coding or building websites, or doing anything with my job, every day I know how to make a decision, because either the decision is going to make the web more accessible or it isn't. Um, and I love, what Beck and Alex are talking about, because you could literally make a decision that either you're bringing more laughter to the hallways or you're not. And that's something that can be quantified, in a really beautifully funny and wonderful way.
Yeah, I think another important distinction to bring forth with what Blake just described there is that those two origin stories, his and the Prescription Joy story, they give you something that you can make a choice. Do I believe in this or do I not believe in this? Right? And if it's something that you choose that you can believe in, then like, I'm sold. How can I plug in? How can I participate? And then those victory conditions that Blake was referencing, what are the metrics? What are the conditions under which we can say this is successful, this is not successful, right? Those are like some of the two super key elements to building these stories and building these brands that they're not just lukewarm on, they're freaking magnetically and excited about, like whatever, they're like as on fire for what you're doing as they possibly can be. Number one, is this something that I can believe in? Number two, is there a way to win or lose? Right? And to crystallize it even just a slight bit more, again, borrowing from Simon Sinek, who's such a great communicator on these types of topics. If you think back to the most famous speech ever given by Dr. King, the I Have a Dream speech, you can't be more authentic and vulnerable about what you believe as a founder or as a person than to share your beliefs, right? And now your beliefs can either be something that I also believe in or that I don't believe in. But because so many people believe the same thing that Dr. King believed, without the internet, without social media, without all the modern conveniences for communication that we have today, hundreds of thousands of them showed up in the mall in Washington, D.C. It wasn't because he was him, it was because his beliefs were their beliefs, right? And you contrast that against the average political speech. How many politicians have ever given the I Have a Dream speech? But we all know the ones that have given the I Have a Plan speech. How can I believe in your plan when I don't even know what you really believe? Like, yo, let's be real. If you're willing to expose where you're vulnerable, which is where your beliefs lie, that's what's going to make people want to be on your team. That's what's going to make people want to make your brand something that they are missionaries about. That's like a key differentiator there.
That's amazing, Johnny. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. And so we're about to run out of time here. We have about 3 minutes left before 12:12. I just want to reaffirm my commitment to you all and getting every project that you spoke about to that level where you are deeply in belief of it, and you have the believers behind you pushing it forward, and you have sustainability behind you, and you know what you're doing, and that key focus. And so in order to get to that point of sustainability, of laser focus, um, we'll meet again next month. And is anything popping with anybody as a kind of what we have to do next? I know Johnny and I have been talking a lot about pitch decks. That's a key thing. That's a way to get funders involved. I wonder if there's anything that that we can use these times as a motivation to get to that next step. Because really, the most you're going to get out of this call is just a motivation to do something and present it and get to that next step towards sustainability. But is anything, I know Johnny and I were talking about pitch decks. That might be something. Victory conditions, I love that. You know, where is a key place to pass and fail? What are they? You know, maybe we need to still be on the more abstract. Anything coming up with anybody? Otherwise, I'll say pitch decks, because pitch decks are how you're going to get funding for these projects. So we got some thumbs up. Okay, cool. So next time we'll do pitch decks. I'll send around a pitch deck. They're fairly simple. And I think it would be most useful if we not necessarily use, well, we use our call as to show pitch decks, but we should also have works in progress throughout the month so that we're not just, you know, blanket presenting something. I'll start a new thread in the Google group, and we can present works in progress, just so you know what a pitch deck ends up doing. Whenever you're meeting with an investor for a first time, a pitch deck is the main thing that's going to introduce yourself to them. And so, you know, personally, there's a few funds that I'm involved with, and they all ask for folks' pitch decks. That's what they want. And I'm personally determined to make the introductions to anyone that has a social impact project with clear metrics behind it, has those clear victory statistics. I will be happy to share their pitch decks with them. So I'll send some more material around pitch decks, and we'll start it in a new thread. Before the minute goes, I should also say one more thing. So the 11/11 party, whatever it's called, is what we're pushing for, and hopefully we get there not as a competition, but as a celebration for all of our successes, and we all see sustainability by November 11th. I might have told some of you this, but Camellia Beans has agreed to help sponsor this party, and they are providing the world's largest bowl of red beans on Monday, November 11th. So we have that firmed and locked, and it's it's kind of crazy, but all proceeds from the bowl of red beans are going to go to different organizations that tackle food insecurity. So if you know of any, let me know of. We're starting to pull together a list, but it is going to be the world's largest bowl of red beans. Other than that, we have a wide open ideas. I think I'm going to also start a thread about red beans. The final thing I'll say too is that we next month we have 3 extra meetings if you want to join them in addition to our usual. Joseph Jacks, who's a big time investor, puts about $100 million a year into companies that do open source technology. He's going to be joining me, I think, in middle of May. Before him, Matt Mullenweg, the guy who created WordPress, is going to be joining me. And I think that's the second Friday on 11/11. I'll put a thread about that. And then in early May, another guy named Bruno Luigi, and Bruno's one of my mentors. He's a super inspirational figure, almost single-handedly built a company, launched it, and sold it according to his terms, totally open source, which means anybody could use his technology. And his technology is now, whenever you go to press print on a website, that's what his technology does. But he's a super inspirational guy and wrote a real guidebook to kind of building a sustainable company and then selling it. And now he has a circus in Belgium. So that's him. So yeah, so stay tuned for more threads. Thank you so much, Johnny. You're awesome, and all of you here are awesome as well.
Hey, my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. For those who didn't see it, I'm totally open to do one-on-ones to assist with those origin stories. I'll drop that in the email list as well. But yeah, everybody, you're doing great work. I'd love to support you in any way I can. Thank you for allowing me to be here today with you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Feel free to
Thanks, y'all.
send a message to anybody. All right. See
Well,
y'all.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.